When people think of this region today, they picture vibrant music and endless fields of wheat. But beneath the modern surface, this landscape cracks under the pressure of a bloody historical reality. This is the deadliest choke point in subcontinent history. Looking at the topographic map reveals exactly why. High mountain ranges to the north and vast deserts to the south create a natural, inescapable funnel. Any foreign army aiming to push into India found their path constricted, forcing them through this exact geographical corridor. Because of that narrow entry point, the land absorbed the full impact of passing armies. For centuries, this territory acted as a physical shield, bearing the brunt of repeated, intense conflicts so the rest of the continent would remain largely untouched. When you live at the literal door to a continent, peace is not an option. The people inhabiting this corridor had to adapt into a warrior culture simply to survive the relentless pressure on their borders. From the Greeks under Alexander to the Mongols and the Mughals, wave after wave of foreign armies clashed. The local population developed defensive strategies, treating their farms as outposts and their communities as garrisons. Living under the constant threat of invasion meant that survival required absolute unity. Over generations, the region's isolationism faded, replaced completely by a shared identity built entirely around martial prowess and collective defense. You can see the culmination of that lineage in the men who eventually secured these borders. Look at the stoic expressions and rigid posture of these Sikh soldiers. Their entire societal structure had evolved to produce highly disciplined, revered military units. The relentless external pressure could have broken the region. Instead, the constant warfare acted as a forge, creating an unbreakable regional identity capable of withstanding anyone who tried to pass through. A profound spiritual evolution occurred alongside the violence, culminating in the birth of Sikhism. This new tradition merged deep spiritual devotion with the strict duty of armed defense. It established a societal code where fighting was justified and demanded to protect the vulnerable from invading forces. The Golden Temple provided an architectural and spiritual epicenter for this strength, giving the community a solid foundation during centuries of extreme political turmoil. Armed with a unified cause and highly trained militias, the people eventually stopped playing defense. They pushed back the invading forces and established their own powerful, independent empire across the Northwest. The rare combination of martial capability and deep spiritual unity made the population highly resilient. They were mentally hardened, which would soon be tested by a political mandate that erased their borders overnight. At the height of their influence, the 1947 partition of British India mandated a sudden, catastrophic division of the land. The borderline sliced directly through the center of Punjab. It severed major rivers, cut off ancient trade cities, and physically tore an ancestral homeland completely in half. The mandate offered them almost zero warning. Millions of families were forced to abandon their homes and their heritage immediately, pushing the displaced masses into chaotic, sprawling refugee camps. The statistics of displacement obscure the physical reality on the ground. When you look at the exhausted elderly and the vulnerable children who made the perilous foot journey across the new border, the stark individual suffering required to survive the exodus becomes clear. Beyond the physical exhaustion, refugees faced a profound psychological toll. People watched centuries of shared cultural heritage burn to ashes, knowing they were permanently separated from their ancestral villages by an impassable border. The trauma of 1947 became the ultimate test of the region's character. It would determine whether the resilience forged over millennia could survive total annihilation. In the immediate aftermath of partition, the newly resettled refugees arrived with nothing. The local economy was devastated, and the remaining agricultural land was barely enough to sustain the survivors. The solution came through a massive technological pivot known as the Green Revolution, turning the ravaged landscape into a high-output agricultural machine. Local farmers collaborated directly with international scientists, standing shoulder to shoulder in the fields, to introduce new, high-yield crop varieties to a desperate population willing to try anything. Crop production surged so dramatically that the battered state soon found itself producing enough food to feed millions across the entire nation. It was an agricultural triumph operating on a massive industrial scale. Today, that intense industrial farming brings complex challenges. The heavy reliance on aggressive agriculture has caused severe ecological strain on the water table and soil, creating mounting economic pressure for modern rural families. But mastering the soil was an act of raw survival. It was a massive defiance against the geopolitical forces that had recently tried to erase them from the map. The families displaced after partition carried their drive overseas, building a massive, highly connected diaspora all over the world. Today, their vibrant music, rich cuisine, and distinct identity have aggressively crossed international borders. The culture is a fixture in global media, carrying uncontainable energy. Despite the physical distance, traditional communal gatherings keep that massive diaspora rooted. The faces seen during festivals like Holi illustrate a living, joyful endurance that ties millions of people back to their ancestral roots. The arc of this region runs from ancient armies defending a continental bottleneck to farmers rebuilding a broken nation, to a cultural force recognized across the globe. Punjab's legacy lies in its capacity for renewal. The people here have repeatedly taken the ashes of total destruction and transformed them into the foundation of enduring strength.